like working with people on problems like this because they're not easy. They're what we call wicked problems, where there's not an easy solution, and you have to work with people, and you have to have conversations and expect more from people than what's necessarily provided. So that's kind of how I got into it. Like anything, it just sort of happens, but there's way more careers in the environment than people sort of speculate there are. And it's not all just environmental education or solar farms or wind farms or things like that. There's lots of different things, and I haven't asked for any of the consulting work. I haven't advertised. If you go on my website, which is up there, it's not been updated in a long time. So apologies for that if you're really interested. But yeah, it's a really interesting time right now in this field. So
how did you come to learn, or how do you come to learn about the Indigenous communities? Because I mean, you're talking about a lot of different Indigenous communities and therefore different perspectives. How did you go about doing that part of things?
Well,
how do you go about
that's
that kind of
it's hard. There are certain advantages. Well, firstly, I'd like to say there's a real benefit in working with Indigenous communities coming from a small town, because a lot of people you watch they come from the cities, they come into an Indigenous community, and there's a pace that they expect, and there's stories. People communicate in stories. People communicate that I know here in the stories. It's not something was totally outside of the realm of my expectations. But with Indigenous communities, I actually wasn't planning on doing much work with them. But I was a research assistant during my master's in study of law with someone who was an Indigenous land claim expert. So he ended up interviewing, I think, like 20 elders, and I transcribed every interview. He never read any of my transcriptions. Oh, sorry, I'm just a little bitter about that still. But I learned so much. And they were all over Canada. And I would go with him to various places and meet Indigenous elders and things like that. And that sort of was eye-opening. But then, because I had that experience, people were more likely keen to bring me onto something else. And so by the time that I got this job with Parks Canada, and I'm going up to see the Cree, though there are they're different languages, different social structures, all these things. If you have Indigenous experience, you're more likely to be able to get the work. And in Yabatong, I don't know why they wanted me. Like I had a meeting with them for 30 minutes. I barely said anything, and I've been working with them for 3 years. And I mean, I have had the best time. They're taking me out on the land next time I go up, which will be extremely dangerous because I do not know how to hold a gun or anything like that. But we're going to go out hunting. It'll be fine. You may not see me again. It may be over. But I think that the key working with Indigenous communities is to try and listen more than you talk. And that's a very hard thing to do in academia when you're trained to talk as much as physically possible, right? You're trained to have answers for questions and to bring, particularly in law, you're trying to, I think, draw things out far too long. But people will tell you things if you just are patient. So that's the key part of that. You know what? It's not. You have to make relationships with people, not just the venerated. You're an Indigenous elder, and that's not. You need to still communicate, like work hard to make relationships. When last time I was in Fort Hope, I made breakfast for everybody, and I'm cooking eggs and they're cleaning their guns on the table, and I'm like, this is not an experience I've had before. Or they were in Guelph, so we went to shoot pool and go play mini putt and all this stuff. And I have to tell you, these guys these are the guys who work in sort of resource development for the community, and they are amazing at pool. Oh my God, it was league night in Guelph, and everybody was staring at them because they were just like, because they have these guys have much better aim from hunting and things like that, but they also had a pool table in the basement of the community hall. So winter, what are you gonna do? They don't. It's a dry community. Nobody drinks, so to go shoot pool for a few hours. And so these guys, and I'm terrible at pool, and I'm this liability for them, and they just laugh at me the whole time. And I'm like, I told you that I couldn't shoot pool. That I was in there like, no, it's fine. We're just gonna each take a turn having you as like our liability for this whole thing. But I think it's about listening and making connections, and you get a lot more information when people are just having a meal or shooting pool or something about what they want from the world than when you're in a formal meeting with everybody. So I guess those are the things. But I'm also pretty lucky. Like I've worked hard to get to this point, but I'm also pretty lucky that these things have happened and I've been able to, so they're sort of cascaded. Anything else? Well, you guys have been extremely patient.
You did good. Thank you for coming, everybody. Feel free to get some coffee. Snapping Turtle will give us some coffee to give out. And then we have cookies, we have water, we have juice boxes. I mean, if you want your inner kid out, you can help yourself. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.